Stop you messing around. Better think of your future. Hello, comrades. How are you doing today? Comrades and friends, is The Simpsons art? I know it's a bit of a bear trap of a title. I think I should state right off the bat that this is not a video essay about The Simpsons. It's not a factual breakdown of each season to season, and it doesn't take you through all the different characters and all the things which went on, the writers and how Augustus died, and the Tracy Ullman show, all those things. Tracy Ullman show, all those things. No, this is. In fact, we're probably barely going to discuss The Simpsons, right? We're barely going to discuss The Simpsons. Kind of. It's just my primary piece of evidence in, a wandering thought, which I had, and I felt like we should go through it, and I felt like we should discuss. And it seems ever more relevant. I'm drawing, by the way, sorry if I seem like I'm ignoring you. I feel like it's ever more relevant because I feel like we're constantly having these conversations of what is content, what is media, where does content fit into the artistic spectrum, into the creative spectrum, into how the world works and how work is produced. We were discussing this at the very beginning of the year with my brother. We were talking about the internet and how things get to it and the way people create. And then I was speaking about this with Bruce, and Bruce and I were talking about different artistic practices and different ideas influencing one another. And I think this is what it boiled down to me, for just this basic question of, is The Simpsons art? Is that what I'm asking? I don't know. Maybe it is. I mean, so first off, we feel like we probably need to discuss, like, what do I mean by this, right? Am I asking if a cartoon is art? Which the answer is yes. Cartoons are art, right? I've had noted cartoon creator and director Aaron Long on, creator of Sub-Low and Tangy Mustard, and he directed episodes of BoJack Horseman, a series which I would never question the artistic integrity of. It's a fantastic series, and it ended on a great note. I consider the Looney Tunes art. The Acme Empire is art. So why are the Simpsons an exception? Why are they something on my list where I'm thinking, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not art. I don't know. Maybe it's lost something. Drawing in itself is art. Writing, I'm drawing right now. Writing in itself is art. And there is good and bad writing, and there is good and bad drawing. So how dare I question it? If you Google this question, I literally Googled this question because I was curious what Google would give me. If you Google it, it definitively tells you The Simpsons is art. It is an artistic piece, according to the online AI search overlords, as they have become known. Acting. It's voice acting. Voice acting is art. All combinations of these things suggest that it is art. So why would I, a man in his mid-30s, sit and question this? Even ponder the idea that this couldn't be art? Well, let me tell you about it. Let me tell you where my brain's going with it. Even in my own personal view, right? I have the own personal view that anything created by humans with creative intent is art, can even be considered fine art, even if the creative intent is simply to capture something which isn't creative, right? It wasn't initially intended to be creative. Something like Duchamp and the fountain, the toilet, which is in an art gallery, or the unmade bed, all these kinds of things. All these items which were rearranged and brought forth by artists in a creative way, that made them fine art. That made them how they enter our cultural zeitgeist as art. So therefore, even in my personal view, The Simpsons is art because it's a creative expression created by people put onto the screen. So maybe that's not the question. Maybe the question already deviated from within the first 5 minutes is not, is The Simpsons art, but also, is The Simpsons good art? Maybe that's the question we're asking. Maybe that's the theory I'm trying to get into. I don't know. It seems it's tickled me. And maybe I'm not talking about. Maybe I'm talking less about the show itself and more what it represents conceptually, which is why we're going to quickly move through The Simpsons and move on to other topics. Hopefully, maybe, who knows? These things are unscripted, so who knows how this goes. So, 1989, The Simpsons aired. Everyone knows the story. Tracy Ullman show comes out. For years, it is considered one of the best shows on TV. The 90s were the era of The Simpsons. They were the Simpsons era. Most culture at that time, in terms of popular entertainment for children, for teenagers, was The Simpsons, even adults. It made its way in. And then everyone seems to agree, culturally, and this isn't just my personal view, but culturally, everyone seems to agree that 8, 9, and 10 is where the seasons started to slip with The Simpsons. And this is from Simpsons Fans Away. And I learnt this because I was fed piles and piles of video essays about The Simpsons. And that's how we got it. It is widely agreed, before you come at me in the comments, widely agreed that 8, 9, and 10 series of The Simpsons were where the tipping point was, right? The tipping point of them starting to inject celebrities into their show, do dumb jokes, and but generally disrespect their own audience. Because, which is interesting, right? That's interesting as a concept of a TV show. Because it's hard to have a piece of art which can change over time. Because usually, if you have a piece of art which changes over time, that's the initial intention. That's the idea. It's part of the concept. But with The Simpsons, it wasn't. It was unique. So in a way, the longer it lasted, the more it tarnished the qualifier that it had as art within the culture. You ask people about The Simpsons now and modern Simpsons, they'll tell you it's trash. They'll tell you it's not good. They might even question whether it's art. In the same way that we would question the trash that is produced by AI. We would sit there and say that's not art. That's just amalgamation of things into a thing. And by some definition, that's what The Simpsons is nowadays, right? I guess if you're striking a comparison, the comparison is, it's like if you had a painting which was never finished. I don't mean never finished as in someone stopped working on it. I mean that it just kept getting painted into every day for infinity, right? Every day someone came and added to this painting. At some point that painting will appeal to some people and it may be considered the best painting in the world. But the longer you work on it, the more it would change and the more it would become something else, which again is kind of fascinating. In movies, you don't really have this problem, do you? Movie comes out, everyone judges the movie for what it is. They're standalone. A good example of that's probably something like Friday 13th series, right? First one came out, everyone seems to agree that it's a cinematically artistic piece. It is valuable from an artistic point of view. It is very well done. And then over time, those things dropped in quality. But people hold on to the initial one. It doesn't tarnish the representation of Friday the 13th. It just tarnishes the later films, which are straight to DVD box sets. Like Hellraiser, same deal. First one, great. And then it just gradually kind of drops off, gets a little weird. They go to space. Look it up. It's a weird vibe in Hellraiser. I mean, in general, it's a weird vibe. But I think the idea there is that The Simpsons, or TV show, right, presents itself as a finished piece. It's not, hey, we're making a TV show and it's going to be one season. It will only ever be one season. I mean, that's kind of the British way of making TV shows. But when you get a modern TV show, when it's launched, the idea is generally not to be a mini-series. Like, there's a difference between a mini-series and a serialized show. When you have a serialized show, they're representing as, this is something we're going to do for a long while. This is something which you're going to engage with over a long period of time. So they're representing it as one product. It's a play which is performed over decades and recorded. It's got maintenance, growth, characters. If they're insinuating that that is the idea of the show, that they're all the same characters and these events happen one after another, that's an interesting concept, because realistically, art has to end. But if The Simpsons never ended and the show went on forever and ever and ever, could it be considered art? Art has to end because the end is just as important as the beginning of the process. I feel like that's maybe a deviation, but that's a truth. Art has to end because it has to reach a finished piece in order to be properly consumed, to get that consumption at the end. Even if the idea of the ending is for it to just abruptly end for one reason or another, death of the artist, cancellation, whatever, it has to end, and then the final review can be given. But if The Simpsons keeps going, it can't end, and therefore can never get a final review. But in maintaining it, keeping going, if the quality continues to drip or drop, it cannibalizes itself. Maybe we might have to come back to that. I think the reason I was having this thought was that I was served a bunch of these essays about The Simpsons and TV shows and the classic clickbait title of how things go. Things go good, things go bad. When did this show get bad? What went wrong with this show? What happened to The Office? How this was the worst thing ever? How this was the best thing ever? The beauty of this season versus that season. And it was beginning to get to me just at the point of, well, really, that these essays are a legacy in themselves. The fact that they are critically reviewing these items from the world once again suggests that this is fine art, suggests that this is something which needs that, something which needs a critical eye upon it to document and involve itself in the world. That's what you do with fine art. That's what you do with artistic pieces. You write essays about it. You study it. You dive into it and you go, this is why this was, and this was the choice of the director, and all these kinds of things. So when people make these essays, they're contributing to that. It's interesting as well because there are other shows I wouldn't, modern shows even, TV shows, which have ended, and I do consider them art. Cheers, for instance, very long-running show. As an artistic piece, it's finished, it's complete. Therefore, you have the entire spectrum to judge, and they consider it character development over time, mixed storylines over time. Bob's Burgers, for instance, has never particularly dipped in quality, in my personal opinion, and it's ongoing, and I would consider it art. I would consider it art. So maybe it's the moment it starts to drop in quality where we get thinking, oh, well, maybe this is more content than art. But the video essays keep coming, so we have to give it that critical eye and think, oh, fine art. Any show is it's a play. It's just a play performed, acted out, and recorded and redistributed. That's all really television is, if you ever consider television to be, when you break it down. Another inspiration for this thought, I think maybe why it trickled me, was I was thinking about music. So Linkin Park, if you know who they are, if you're my age, you more than likely know who they are. They recently relaunched the band with a new headline singer, because their former singer sadly passed away. They relaunched with a new singer, and they're still called Linkin Park. For many people, this posed an issue, mentally, conceptually, because they were presenting it as this is a continuance of Linkin Park. But bands swap members all the time. And then I was reading an interview with the bassist of Linkin Park, who was saying he is no longer interested in doing the live shows, but he does write all the bass parts. So in the studio, that's where he feels creative, that's where he feels attached to the product and the process. So that's what he's sticking to. And then they employ someone to play his bass pieces on stage. So are you even seeing Linkin Park? Or are you seeing a subtle representation of Linkin Park? or an imitation of Linkin Park because the original members aren't there. Slipknot, another band, which is in my kind of list of top bands. Big fan of them. They have 9+ members. Over time, those members have changed so many times for numerous reasons, including tragedies and disagreements. They sound different to when they began. They represent themselves as a whole, as a consistent entity. But then with music, they don't represent themselves as a product, do they? They represent themselves as a collective who produce a product in the same way a publishing house does. But this is why it tickled me. It tickled me because it created this kind of unique paradox in my mind of defining art. And when we're all talking about defining art and content and dealing with TikTok and Reels and short format things and long format things and what is best and what isn't best to get views, that it just caused me to think maybe The Simpsons is a loophole. It's a loophole paradox. And I don't know if they know it. I don't know if the public knows it, which is why I kind of wanted to bring it to you, right? So let's break it down. Let's break it down as a pure concept, right? The Simpsons is a show which has been running for a very long time. Nearly 30 seasons. There are huge rumors about it ending at series 30, but if they present it, they're presenting it as one. They're not presenting it as The Simpsons are a group of people who make a show. Right? They're presenting it as The Simpsons is a long-running entity, therefore needs to be considered in one continuum. It was a satire of the world they were living in. It was meant to be a satire of the world they were living in and existing media at the time. Right? Those are just facts. These are just straight up facts. It will end. At some point, The Simpsons will end. It will come to a stop. The network will drop it. The creators will pull it. Whoever owns the IP, they'll lose too many of the core cast. They will have to stop at some time. The world will end. Something will stop it. Online media will just disappear. Some sort of electromagnetic interference will just trigger Simpsons will end. No more Simpsons. Which means when we look back at it, the people who come after it will be looking at it from this point of view. Of this was fine art. This is what they considered art. This is what they considered the best of the best of the best. And they watched it religiously. And that's the loophole. That it will end. One way or another. Like if you think about, I think this is what I'm saying, and maybe I've skipped a couple of sentences, but if we take it back to the painting, right? If the painting never ends, and you can't stop the painting, because the whole process of creating the painting was to have it continuous, to have it run forever, that in itself becomes the art piece, not the painting. The finished painting doesn't really matter in the end, because the whole process became about the creation of it. So when you think about The Simpsons now, let's apply that back. When you think about The Simpsons now, we're looking at a space where it doesn't matter how good The Simpsons was at the beginning and how subpar it is now or will be, or even how good it is in the future, because the whole process of just creating the show, keeping it running, is the piece. That's the piece in itself, right? A show which cannibalizes itself constantly is a fantastic idea for art, which no one would ever fund. Something which lasts forever. Fine artist comes to someone and says, I'm going to make something which lasts forever. You're going to have to pay me millions and millions to keep it going. It's going to take cast, all these kinds of things. Oh, by the way, it's fine art. They would never fund that. No one's getting a check for that. But to create an initial concept which would appeal to the general world, which we then, over time, diminish, is fascinating. It also reflects our society from the initial satire. The initial satire, which was The Simpsons, of looking at the world and the media we're consuming and how that changed and became worse and kind of parodied it. The Simpsons becoming a parody of itself represents the rest of society and the media which we're consuming becoming a parody of itself. The fact that we have TV shows and YouTube channels and TikToks and all these things which are just someone reacting to something is proof of this. It's proof of that gradual downturn. The fact that we're having this conversation, the fact that I'm here sponting pontific about it, those aren't even words. It's a Sisyphus of a TV show. It just keeps rolling up and rolling down. And Sisyphus in itself is a artistic metaphor. There's that, what is it? There's an artist, I think it's Sun Young and Peng Yu. I think that's right. Please don't judge my pronunciation. There's a piece they created called Can't Help Myself. You'll have seen it. It's online, hugely viral, of a machine which is leaking fluids, and it sweeps the fluids back into itself. And the idea is that it's leaking these fluids, which it needs to survive, and we'll need to sweep them back in, basically ad infinitum, for infinite time, forever. It also stops to engage with the crowd, though. It also stops to wave and say hi and pretend to be happy, because machine, it can't really do anything else. And that's a very similar idea. That's a very similar view. Over time, it was a happy machine. It started off with good intention and then became a dilapidating one. Just so you know, by the way, as a tidbit of factual information, that's all an illusion. That artistic piece, that robot never needed the fluid. It was powered by other things. It just was programmed to deteriorate over time. And that adds even more to the concept. That adds so much to this. It was a great idea to begin with, and then the fact that it was created and set up to do that, so well done. It's just brings me back to The Simpsons, right? Fine art world is filled with performance art. It's filled with pieces which, if this was the concept, it would be lauded, it would be applauded, rather than looking at it and saying, this is deteriorated, this is moderate crap, this is not something we want on our televisions. I mean, endurance art is a whole genre of art and media. Matthew Barney creates these things which are called resistance drawings, where he puts barriers between him and the act of creating. Marina Abramovich, I can't remember what the name of the piece she did was. What was the... that's going to bug me. Rhythm Zero or Rhythmo. She did that piece where she sits in a room with objects around her, a crowded audience. She doesn't move. Allows the audience to do whatever they want to do. Piece lasted like 6 hours before they had to stop it because the audience had gone violent. They'd formed factions. They'd hurt her, assaulted her. That's a whole genre of fine art which is based on this, is based on the concept of just continuation, right? Based on this idea that you have an idea and it just gets grown and built over time. Benjamin Bennett should just come back to my mind. Creates these videos of smiling, sits and stares at the camera for 4 hours, doesn't move. He got burgled once during one of those performances. Cries during it, just keeps smiling for 4 hours. What I'm saying is, The Simpsons we know in the modern age, which if you look at it as a show and you remember it by its latest episode, I think we'd consider to be bad art. It's intended to be art, but it's not. It's bad art, therefore not art. You know, It's full of dumbfounded things, chasing topics day to day, celebrity cameos, all those things. It's a mundane comedy, but it's produced by a writing staff. It's a style, it's adjusted over time. It's not the same product it was. But from a business point of view, if they want me to consider it as a whole, and they want me to consider it as this is The Simpsons, all of it's The Simpsons, you should respect it all in the same way. Maybe that's the view of it, right? Maybe that's what becomes more relevant. I think this also comes back to a question which becomes more and more relevant every day, sadly, when we discuss art and creation and the people who make the things we make and enjoy and consume. And I think some of it comes back to, is it the art or is it the artist? Is it the creation of content, the creation of art, the creation of media, or is it the person creating it? Do you remove them from that process, or do you involve them in that process, and the process itself is the creation of it? With The Simpsons, it's almost like I'm trying to save it in my head and say it doesn't matter that it got worse, because overall the concept of it being a show which has changed over time and adjusted over time is far more fascinating than what it's become. So do I think The Simpsons is fine art, or good art, or bad art? I think the answer is yes. I think I consider it to be fine art, but just not in the way they intended it to be. They intended it to be this groundbreaking show which would break barriers and change the world, and it did. It upset the balance of things for quite a while. And then over time, they lost ownership of it. Not just the owners, not the creators, Matt Groening and all those. Not just those, but the companies themselves. They lost ownership of it because we started looking at it in a different way. Which shows you, all this really boils down to is conjecture. It's what the audience interprets it to be. If I look at The Simpsons now, I'm looking at it from a point of view of less, is this a quality show? And therefore a quality show is fine art and an art and is happy to be? Or is this media, entertainment, something which needs to be funny and accessible to the general world? Or am I looking at this and going, you know what, the fact that this was made in the first place continues to be made? That's fascinating. That's way more interesting than if this is just entertaining or funny to me. It makes you wonder how it'll end, how that story will complete. I'm curious what you think, and I'm curious if you know of any other examples of this. If there's other material and media which really pickles your brain in terms of whether it's culturally art. Because this, I think, is the first one in a long while where I've had to sit and really think about it. Which is great news. Because it means there's still questions out there which are going to bother me like this. Until then, I'll talk to you guys later. Cowabunga, dude.